In our department in Tsinghua University, we have many students from Germany, and we had a chance to ask German students to work with Chinese students a lot. And just like my colleague from Stanford University, talking to her students from Stanford and students from Peking University, I also talked to our Chinese students and German students to see how they like to work with each other. One important issue coming up was time management. Chinese students found the way the German classmates manage time in a totally different way. And the German students feel time management of Chinese students very different. We did a little survey on how Chinese and Germans manage their time. In the case, there's students, they're not just business people. Students, how students manage their time. Chinese students confirmed they frequently use time management tools. Remember, we talked about uncertainty avoidance. Why do they have to frequently use time management tools? Because a lot of changes. Because of uncertainties. If there are many uncertainties, changes in time arrangement, then they have to use time management tools frequently. I can even share with you my personal experience. I have some activities arranged outside China. I found out I usually have to arrange those activities earlier than local activities. When I get back to Beijing, when I go to my office to manage my time, I often find many last-minute changes in my life. And similar situation for my Chinese students. And I also had one very interesting experience about 10 years ago. I was notified a meeting of some professors. The meeting was notified, as far as I can remember, like 3 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. I marked it, and I checked. And in that morning, I went to the place, I went to the room, and I expected a meeting of some professors. But I found out I was the only one person in the room. That was very strange. I used my mobile phone. I called the professor, arranged the meeting. The professor apologized, said, sorry, the meeting was canceled. I forgot to tell you. But the important thing is, he said, but we didn't confirm. No confirmation means no meeting. So that professor talked to me. He said, in your case, it seems like no confirmation means no change. Very different philosophy of time management. After that, I learned I need to double confirm or confirm many times about some arrangement. Come back to our students, Chinese and German students. German students do not use the time management tools that much, that often than Chinese students. Was it because they don't have time arrangement or they didn't plan their time? The answer is no. They do. But they tend not to change their time arrangement. Again, here, I'm not saying which way is better, which way is worse. It really depends. Depends on people, depends on work, depends on organization, and many other issues. But in that case, we found it so interesting how Chinese students and German students manage time in a different way. And one interesting finding of the survey tells us more about time management philosophy. The finding was German students had a tendency to maintain an organizational commitment. The finding was higher preference of organization from German students. The Chinese students didn't feel so. We found German students somehow, some way, consider time arrangement in organizational more important in that case. The Chinese students accept uncertainties and changes, so they know if there's some arrangement, we may be able to change it. That's what I mean. So there are different philosophy of time management. And we find out Chinese people have strong tendency to monochronic time orientation, meaning Chinese students in that case very frequently and reasonably use time management tools, mechanics. The Germans somehow less frequently use of planning mechanics and stronger preference of organization. Not just students. One of my colleagues asked me a question. In the department, we study in industrial engineering. We study made in China, and we also study made in Germany. He asked me, what's the difference? And how can we improve things made in China? Why there's some differences? That's a big question. Very difficult to answer. But I'm thinking, time management is associated how people make things, build things. I think this is relevant. And what's your opinion? How do you think? Well, if the case is not important, let me go further to introduce this time orientation concept. Time orientation concept or time orientation theory. Basically, the theory is about how people manage their time. Do they combine many activities simultaneously or do one thing at a time? For Chinese people who have been in the environment, I found it's difficult for Chinese people to really tell different ways of managing time. But from my international students, I have some insights about time orientation. I think one Spanish student or a student from Southern Europe, I don't exactly remember, he talked to me once about time orientation. He said when he goes to a coffee shop to order coffee to go, he finds out the person serving him does not focus on his order. After taking his order, he was asked to wait. Well, people need time to make good coffee, we understand. But at the same time, he found out there are many Chinese people try to talk and try to give orders. He didn't really understand. He found out Chinese people tend to combine activities simultaneously instead of serving one person at a time. Chinese people, in that case, want to sell or want to buy more coffee. And he felt the difference how people manage their time, how people approach their tasks and their jobs, and how people manage their time for objectives. And in that case, the difference was in how people manage time according to competition of tasks and how people cope with competing tasks together. I think if you want to know Chinese style of time management, you can visit China and try to check the timetable of subway or check timetable of bus, like local bus. In the subway systems of many big cities in the world, you can find timetable. The timetable tells you when there will be a train going where, to which direction. But if you have a chance to visit China, for example, if you try to take Beijing subway, you go to subway station, you try to find timetable. You will find it, but you find a timetable designed in a very different way. And you also find out people do not need the information of timetable because the timetable does not exactly tell you which train will arrive. The timetable will roughly tell you when the train could be arriving. In a case, in a subway system near Tsinghua University, that's the timetable I found. Actually, it doesn't matter if you read Chinese or you do not read Chinese. You could not figure out when is the first train. The timetable doesn't say it. Chinese people don't think they need information, or the information will be given somewhere else in different ways, so not in the table. And also, the last train. So when is the last train? Try to read the timetable. You won't find it. You don't know. The timetable says from the first train to 6:28. But when is the first train? Depends. That's what I mean. Uncertainties and time orientation. But did you find Beijing people or Chinese people? Did you find the Chinese passengers very confused? No. Chinese passengers don't feel any problem of the system. Chinese passengers do not rely on the timetable to arrange their life. They manage time in a different way.